Hello, everybody. Welcome to another amazing session at We Give Summit. My name is Isis Krause. I'm part of the Philanthropy Together team. Today, get ready for an amazing session. It's called Run Toward, Not From Change. And that's exactly, we all know that we need to be doing this. We don't always know how. So you're going to hear from a fantastic group about how to actually do that. So thank you so much, Philanos team, for putting this session together. Just a reminder that the closed captioning is enabled so you can see the transcript if you need to. And we look forward to a wonderful session. Take it away, Susan.
Thank you so much, Isis, and thank you to Team Philanthropy Together for pulling together another incredible We Give Summit. As Isis said, I'm Susan Benford. I'm the chair of Philanos. For those of you who might not know, Philanos is the leading women's giving circle network in the country. Since 2019, Philanos has catalyzed the women's philanthropy movement by connecting women's giving circles and collective giving organizations. Our members represent 78 of these groups in 28 states, the District of Columbia, Australia, and England, and we have 18,000 female members in total. Philanos empowers women's collective giving organizations through connection, education, and peer-to-peer support. Our members benefit from exposure to and collaboration with a national audience of smart, engaged, philanthropic women and all who identify as women. Philanos affiliates vary by membership, investment, and governing models. However, they all share one guiding mission: to purposely donate financially, to become informed donors, and to make lasting collective impact in their local communities. Philanos is proud to be one of the organizations that helped to establish Philanthropy Together and to be a strong partner in We Give Summit and with all Philanthropy Together efforts. Today, we've got a terrific program for you from two Philanos board members who lead two impressive Philanos affiliates. Buffy Beaudoin-Schwartz is Executive Director of the Women's Giving Circle of Howard County, Maryland, and Stephanie Cook is the Executive Director of the San Diego Women's Foundation. While each of these organizations is different, their leadership shares a common commitment: embracing organizational and strategic change to successfully facilitate growth. All of these efforts focus on having grants that deliver maximum impact, the core of which each organization does. Our specific objectives for today's session are to discuss recent opportunities for these two giving circles to run toward both operational and strategic change, hear what these changes are and why these organizations chose to embrace them, and learn how each giving circle enacted these changes and what results. Change is necessary in nearly all endeavors, and giving circles and giving circle networks, regardless of their age, size, or composition, must remain nimble, flexible, and open to implementing change. Sometimes these changes are operational, like changing or raising membership's contributions, and sometimes these changes are strategic, like integrating equity and inclusion into grant making. In both cases, leaders are challenged to persuade the majority to follow an often untried new direction. And such is the beauty of democracy. We'll begin today with a discussion about how both groups implemented changes and the successes and challenges of their efforts. We'll then have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and comments. Kindly use the Q&A feature for all questions and use the chat function for anything else. Now I will turn it over to Buffy, who will kick off a discussion about strategic changes made at the Women's Giving Circle of Howard County.
Thanks so much, Susan, and good afternoon, everyone. The Women's Giving Circle of Howard County, Maryland, which is in between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, was founded in 2002 with 15 founding members. I am proud to be one of them, as well as a past chair and now serving as our first executive director. We are a field of interest fund at the Community Foundation of Howard County. And our mission is building a community of philanthropists and creating a permanent legacy to address the needs of women and girls in Howard County. We started 20 years ago with multiple giving levels and by building an endowment. And today we have over 1,600 members who have given the last 20 years. We've awarded over $1 million through over 250 grants to our nonprofit partners to date. And we've built a $1.3 million endowment to ensure that there are funds to support women and girls in our community in perpetuity. And we are in year 3 of a 5-year effort to integrate a DEI lens and framework into all of our work. We recently embarked on a journey to better understand the challenges and the needs of women and girls in our community as part of our 20th anniversary year through our new State of Women and Girls in Howard County, a baseline compilation of data and a resource about women from statistics published by a range of federal, state, and county agencies, as well as public, private, and nonprofit organizations. And our goal in doing this was twofold. First, to gather existing data and develop a compilation of baseline information through a gender lens that identifies key issue areas that impact women and girls in Howard County so we can inform our past, our current, and our future grant making. And also to provide other Howard County funders, nonprofit partner organizations, government agencies, and the broader community for use in determining funding, supporting and implementing programs, and developing legislation to address the needs of women and girls in our county. And our funding is focused on programs that benefit women and girls in these 6 general areas: demographics and diversity, work in the economy, education and educators, health and well-being, safety and justice, and leadership and political participation. So Stephanie, let's hear about the San Diego Women's Foundation.
Great. Thank you, Buffy, and hello all. As Susan mentioned, I am the executive director of the San Diego Women's Foundation, but I'm also a very proud Women's Foundation member. And our organization was founded in the year 2000 with a mission to connect, educate, and inspire women to come together in collective philanthropy. So we were founded as a supporting organization of the larger San Diego Foundation, and we've retained that relationship to this day, though we are also our own 501c3 with a separate board of directors. For us, the first 100 members that joined us were considered our founding members, and many of them are still with us today. In total, as of our most recent count, we have about 200 active members. Each of our members pay annual membership dues of either $2,500 or $1,250, and that's based on giving capacity. So from those dues, a small portion goes to our endowment, which is at about $4.8 million today, and also to our operations to fund things like our programming and our staff expenses. But the bulk of annual membership contributions go directly into our grants pool, which we aim to spend down to zero each year. In the 22 years since our founding, our members have granted out more than $4.5 million to over 100 nonprofit organizations in San Diego County. Now, we don't focus our grant making on women and girls. Our funding focus changes every year, and it's really based on what we're seeing and hearing as needs in the community. So we have a group of really fabulous, dedicated members who engage in research, and they connect with key stakeholders in the community and other funders, government agencies, folks doing research. And we actually put it to a popular member vote to determine what our focus will be. But past focus areas have really ranged from human trafficking intervention and prevention to providing critical support to refugees and asylum seekers. We also, like Buffy, began integrating an equity lens into our work about 5 years ago, and we are entering year 3 of a 3-year strategic plan that has and hopefully will continue to transform really our grants, membership structure, community impact, and more. But I will wait and share a bit more about that later. For now, I think I'm going to pass the screen back to Buffy so we can hear about how WGC Howard County has run toward and not from organizational change.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So like Stephanie said, today I'm going to be discussing how the Women's Giving Circle has run toward change from an organizational perspective with our giving structure, and in particular, our new Big Give opportunity. And I'm going to review why we've enhanced our giving structure to offer the Big Give, what it is, and how this change has come about, and some of the outcomes so far. So about 2.5 years ago, the Women's Giving Circle was just starting our 18th year and had just gone from being an all-volunteer organization for the most part for 18 years to being one with a new executive director. And I'm so honored to have taken on that role. And there was so much that we had done as an organization, but we were at a point that in order to move ourselves forward, we really needed to take a step back and assess how best to organize ourselves for the future. Thus comes the change. When we first started, our founders took a bit of a different path for our giving circle. We decided to act like a traditional giving circle, but organize ourselves more similar to a women's fund, and that we have multiple entry points for members, an advisory board that makes all the funding and other decisions, and we decided to build an endowment, as I mentioned, from the get-go. And this was very successful for us in a variety of ways. The multiple entry points allowed for a more diverse and inclusive group of women to participate from the beginning. Our advisory board was able to make quick decisions to help our early growth and sustain that growth. And again, we now have a $1.3 million endowment. But it has also presented a number of challenges, as you might imagine. The multiple entry points made the value of membership a little bit confusing. It was a little harder to explain how people could get involved, more than a traditional giving circle model. And having an advisory board making all the decisions also made it harder to more broadly engage members on an ongoing basis. Building the endowment also, obviously, while it has had its successes, it also meant that we didn't have as much money coming in, we had a money in, or didn't have a money in, money out model, which meant that there was less money for grant making overall. So 2 years ago, our advisory board, led by our fearless chair, Barb Van Winkle, who's joining us today, and our membership and development committee chair, Melissa Curtin, and our incredible group of leaders decided that we needed to start steering the ship or righting the ship in a little bit of a different direction and provide some significant organizational changes for our 20th anniversary year by making giving and membership opportunities a little bit more clear and providing more opportunities for members to engage, including a new traditional giving circle option for us. And it was right when COVID started. And while it presented some challenges, like doing most, if not all of the planning by Zoom, it also allowed us some freedom to really focus on this. But after 18 years, we struggled with how best to do this. How do we run toward this change? And we had a number of questions that our advisory board grappled with for over a year, back and forth, including, should we just start all over and start with a traditional giving circle model on our 20th anniversary year? Or should we get rid of the wide variety of giving options that our members have been accustomed to for 18 years? And if we broaden our giving options, would it cause confusion for our members? Would it dilute our brand? And would we be able to build on our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals? And finally, what would our founders think? Would they be concerned about these changes? And it was a little nerve-wracking, but after 2 years of conversations and planning and getting advice and guidance from our members and some of our original founders, this is how we ran toward organizational change with our giving structure. And again, with our new Big Give opportunity. We did 3 specific things. The first thing we did was to make it more clear what being a member means in a way that we really had not done for 18 years in one way or another. We made sure that everyone knows that anyone who gives is a member of the Women's Giving Circle, and that all member gifts, regardless of the size, are valued and appreciated, and that all member gifts support 3 things: our grant making, our core strength, and our endowment. And we also made some decisions that made it more clear that 80 cents of every dollar given to the circle goes directly to our grant making, and 20 cents goes directly to our core strength, so that we can ensure that we're able to continue our important work each year. We also made it more clear that there are only 2 exceptions to this. First, gifts to our emergency response network, where 100% of the gifts go directly to the stated emergency, and for legacy members, where 100% of their donation goes to our endowment. And this might sound simple, but for us, this change after 18 years of doing things a certain way, and with ever-changing communication and engagement options, taking a step back, making these decisions and working to ensure that our messaging, our marketing, and our communications were more clear has been very valuable for our circle, for our leadership, and for those who are involved in the circle. So the second thing we did is then we consolidated all of our giving opportunities into our branded 4 distinct ways to give to the Women's Giving Circle. Number 1, a community member, 2, a sponsor member, and 3, a legacy member. These are all ways that women have been accustomed to giving to the Women's Giving Circle, but they weren't branded or labeled that way. So our large and maybe sometimes confusing portfolio of giving options is now better branded and explained more clearly. And so, for example, the picture in the right-hand corner, that's a picture of what we called our WGC Circle team. So we had over 100 women through the years that raised over $100,000 for the Women's Giving Circle as part of our circle team by participating in triathlons and raising money for the circle. And it was amazing. It brought a lot of new women to the table, but it wasn't really clear, are they members of the circle? What's the value of membership and all of that? It was successful, but it was not as branded as it is now. And so that's just one example of how women were accustomed to giving that is now what would have been part of our community membership. And we've clarified all these different ways into this branded portfolio now. And so we made one of these new 4 distinct ways to give our new opportunity called the Big Give. And this is what is structured more like a traditional giving circle. And the way we're promoting it is for those who want to learn more about grant making to women and girls through this new hands-on philanthropic investment opportunity. So like a traditional giving circle that many of you likely participate in, women will identify funding opportunities together. They will vote on grant recipients together. It's $1,200 per year to participate for one vote, and teams of up to 4 women can be formed. With one vote per team. Of course, the amount of grants that we're going to give will be determined by the number of women who participate, just like a traditional giving circle. And we're starting this out this year, and we're doing it as a 4-month opportunity from July through October. And our goal is for our first year to have 20 women or teams join this year for our 20th anniversary year. But really, our overall goal is to grow this option such that it becomes a primary, if not the primary way that women give to the Women's Giving Circle each year. So we launched this at our annual celebration in March, and the deadline for women to register is at the end of this month, and we're over halfway to our goal and believe that we'll get there. So during our 20th anniversary year, after several years of consideration and discussions and engagement with members, we believe that running toward this organizational change will bring us closer to a traditional giving circle structure while honoring our founders' original multi-level giving desire, and really provide more and more clear engagement opportunities to our longtime and our new members. So what is it that we've learned by running toward this organizational change after 20 years? Well, we know that organizational change can be daunting and sometimes met with resistance or uncertainty. But in order to build on our first 20 years, we really felt that running toward this change was vital for our giving circle, not just to thrive, but really to survive, for years to come. And we worked to address uncertainty, which we did have, by involving our advisory board from the beginning, of course, our founders and some members in the change process, consulting with them, listening to their ideas and concerns, and engaging them in the journey. And we've been, again, strategically communicating about this for the past year. So we zigged and zagged a bit for the 2-year planning process. And honestly, it's good that we did, because we ultimately came up with this new framework that will carry us through our next 20 years and beyond. And we believe for us, it is a more inclusive way, and it provides a more diverse platform of giving opportunities that is already resulting in more engagement. And finally, as we celebrate our 20th anniversary year, we're celebrating our run toward organizational change, as we're seeing a lot of excitement about our efforts. And we believe that it will help grow our circle and ultimately grow our giving. So Stephanie, let's hear how the San Diego Women's Foundation has run towards strategic change.
Absolutely. And at first, I just want to say, wow, Buffy, I mean, what a phenomenal job you've done with your organization. You must be so proud. Just a round of applause for WGC. Well, now that you've heard from Buffy about how her organization has run towards organizational change, I'll share, as Buffy mentioned, a bit more about how the Women's Foundation in San Diego has made strategic moves to advance equity and change within our organization and community. So in 2019, my organization embarked on our strategic planning process to mark our 20th anniversary. So many parallels, Buffy. We worked with consultants, surveyed, and then held sort of small group conversations with our members, and also interviewed nonprofits in our region to understand what we're doing well and what we could be doing better to serve our community. The result of those conversations and surveys was sort of a multi-pronged strategic plan containing 6 key focus areas and about 30 action items in total that ranged from building out our educational programming and learning opportunities to ensuring that we have a robust and diverse pipeline of future leaders for the Women's Foundation. If you are interested in seeing sort of the one-pager we made to highlight the big picture strategic framework, I believe we have a link that we'll be dropping in the chat soon. But for the purposes of this program, I am going to focus on a few parts of our strategic plan that were really equity focused and did signify pretty major strategic changes for our organization. And those 2 changes were, 1, a decision to shift from program restricted to unrestricted grants, and 2, a plan to center community voices in our grant making. So that first action item, the move to unrestricted funding, was really the result of listening to the nonprofit community. I mentioned earlier that as part of that 20-year strategic planning process, our consultants held conversations with nonprofits in the region and asked them, what could the Women's Foundation be doing better? And across the board, we heard that we were doing a good job, but some things that we could be doing better. And I think the 3 things we heard most loud and clear were that nonprofits in our region wanted us to explore multi-year funding opportunities. They wanted us to shorten and streamline our grants application process, and they wanted us to begin granting unrestricted funds. And I'm very proud to share that we are in the process right now of exploring multi-year funding models. We were actually able to immediately adjust our grants application process, at the request of the applicants, and shorten and streamline that process. And I think most importantly, create less of a lag time between when a nonprofit applies for funding and when final funding decisions are made. But that third point, the move to unrestricted funding, we knew that would be a bit more of a challenging process for us. As a membership organization, we really don't make many, if any, changes without taking the time to build consensus among our members. And we knew that it would require dedicated learning, multiple conversations, and significant effort to shift to unrestricted funding. I see in the chat really quick, I'm just gonna say, it looks like you may need access to get to the document. I'll make sure that that is available later. But to return to what I was saying, we knew it would take some work, but hearing the nonprofits in our community share how difficult it is to string together a budget with restricted funds really helped us to understand that not practicing trust-based philanthropy was actually hindering our nonprofit partners' ability to be nimble in their responses to emerging community needs, and thus limiting their impact. And Buffy, you mentioned sort of how things shifted during the COVID pandemic. I think unrestricted funds and creating space for nimble responses was absolutely key during COVID. So certainly that helped us dive right into some of these changes. But at the time when we were doing the strategic planning process and writing out our framework, we had been successfully granting funds for almost 20 years. And I think this process was really eye-opening for us. Hearing this kind of feedback from the nonprofit community led us to begin questioning, what else are we not seeing by nature of the hierarchy of our process, and maybe the lack of transparency and open communication between us and our nonprofit partners. And, I don't think this needs saying, but everybody on the call will certainly agree that collective giving organizations are a massively important vessel for channeling much needed funds into the community. But I think that too often there's a separation between those that hold decision-making power and those at the center of an issue. And realizing this was certainly a paradigm shift for us as an organization. We grappled with this concept and really worked to come to terms with the fact that as an organization, we are a group of very passionate and well-meaning, but also quite privileged people, perhaps too far separated from those with lived experience to necessarily know how best to serve the community. And that revelation led us to a number of changes aimed at breaking down the barriers between grant maker and grantee, and really working to be in closer community with those we hope to serve through our grants. And as you'll see on the screen, we have done a lot in this space in a short period of time, but some of the more noteworthy changes included adding nonprofit representatives to our board of directors to make sure that those working most closely with individuals with lived experience could be part of our top decision-making processes. We now invite a representative from each organization that is awarded funding to join us and be part of our organization for at least the duration of their grant term. And that's fully funded by the Women's Foundation, those membership dues. And the reason there is to build community with our nonprofit partners and involve new and diverse perspectives in our processes and grant making. We also now begin each grant cycle with an appreciative inquiry process where we ask the community to help us build our grant guidelines. And to return to a point I made earlier, and I see Lisa echoed that point in the chat, by virtue of our privileges, we simply don't know what, for example, a newly arrived asylum seeker wants or needs. And we feel like this is one space in particular where we perhaps should step back and allow those with lived experience, or at least working most closely with those with lived experience, to define what impact and intervention should look like. Another change to our grants process involved embedding two-way feedback loops into each stage of our grant selection process. And just to clarify a bit there, Buffy mentioned, I think, that there's an advisory board that sort of makes their funding decisions. We have one central grants pool, and that the process of reviewing grant applications, from letters of inquiry to proposals and even site visits, that's run by any member that wants to participate. So we sort of put out an all call, folks sign up, they receive training, and our members are the ones who make funding decisions each year. And we are now soliciting regular feedback from applicants about how we can improve that process so that we don't have to wait till the next strategic plan to know that maybe there's something we could be doing a bit better. But something else that we're doing now, I said two-way feedback. I now extend a personal invitation to each organization when they're cut from our grant selection process. That's a lot of organizations, let me tell you. I think we grant out $200,000 to $300,000 a year, and we started this year's grants application process with close to $3 million in funding requests. But I reach out to a representative from each organization as they're cut and extend an invitation to meet one-on-one and provide feedback from our grant reviewers. This is, as I mentioned, time consuming, but I have heard from countless nonprofits that far too few, if any, funders are willing to offer feedback at any level. And even the tiniest bit of feedback can really massively inform how these nonprofits approach future grant opportunities. And ultimately, that's what we want, is for every nonprofit to be as successful as possible. So it has been massively fulfilling. And the final point that I'll mention here is that we've created more opportunities for experts in the community to come in and teach us about their work and area of expertise. And the purpose there is to help us become more informed decision makers. So this includes not only allowing nonprofit organizations a platform to sort of showcase their work and their concerns and exciting projects, but also learning opportunities with trainers on topics like how implicit bias impacts grant making or how to grant funds with a racial equity lens. And all of these changes I've mentioned have happened in a short period of time, but not without significant effort. And sort of to speak to the process, we began with a core group of SDWF members and leaders that were really involved in our strategic planning process and thus very invested in these changes. We tapped into their passion for this work by having them facilitate many member-led discussions where we shared what changes we were thinking about making and why. And an important piece of this is that we treated each of those sessions as a forum and really encouraged members to speak up, share their concerns, and ask any questions they had. If at any point we felt like a significant number of our members weren't quite comfortable with proposed changes, rather than scrapping the plans, because we knew there was sort of an equity point in mind, and we knew it was important to make these changes. But we saw questions and concerns as an opportunity to step back and address those concerns through educational programming, which has been massively helpful in getting our members to be on board and in fact champion things like unrestricted funding. Having all of these steps in the process where we welcomed and involved any SDWF member that wanted to participate helped us build trust among our members and really reach consensus. And then, of course, once consensus was reached, there was still the issue of implementation. We are very lucky to have staff at the Women's Foundation. I do not know how it would have been possible to implement so many changes in such a short period of time without having dedicated staff working on them. And I sort of joke that if it felt to our members like we were running towards change, it felt to the staff at times more like a sprint. But I have to say it's all been worth it, because the end result of all of these changes has been deeper and more authentic relationships with nonprofits in our community, engaged and excited members, a more equitable and transparent grants process, and of course, grant making that better reflects the voice and needs of the communities we serve. And just recently, we held a multi-day training session with expert trainer and consultant Beena Patel on advancing racial equity in philanthropy. And she left us with some sage wisdom I'd love to share as I sort of wrap up my piece here. And the first point is that as funders, we really need to be looking at who is at the table. We should be building organizations and grant-making processes representative of the diversity of the communities that we serve. And we should be creating space to not only hear, but also heed community voices. And in thinking about changes that would advance equity in our work, we shouldn't be asking what is possible, but what is necessary. It can seem daunting and even impossible to shift grant-making processes that have a decades-long history, but really, if it's in the best interest of the community, it is necessary, and you'll find a way. Well, thank you all. I think that's all from me. Thank you for allowing me to share. I'm now going to pass the screen off to Susan, who will facilitate Q&A.
Well, thank you, Stephanie and Buffy. It's kind of head spinning to realize what the two of you were able to accomplish, and especially with organizations that are 20 plus years old. I guess my first question, and I'll get to the questions in the chat as well, but what are some of the processes you use to gain consensus among your membership, especially with such seismic shifts in what you're doing? And I heard an emphasis on participation and communication. Tell us more about that, about getting consensus there.
Stephanie, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. I think the first thing I'd say is maybe don't assume you know where your members and community are at. We have often been surprised by how excited and willing our members are to really embrace change. And sometimes I think we get set in this place where we think that because things have been done a certain way, our members are happy. And for us, that education component, creating a space to have small conversations, has really enabled us to bring members along and turn them into champions. So I would say, even when folks are unhappy with changes, reach out, connect with them, and give them an opportunity to have their voice heard, because oftentimes those folks, when they shift and turn the page, they become the biggest champions for the changes that you're hoping to make.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I'd say for us, it was, as I'd mentioned, it was about a year to year and a half process of kind of going back and forth among our advisory board about what path we should take. And, it was a little bit confusing about some of the options and what would be best for us. And I think by listening to concerns and uncertainty around the table, going back to the drawing board, rethinking what the strategy could look like, bringing it back to the advisory board, listening again to challenges. It took us about maybe a year to year and a half to think through this framework for us that ended up being a path for the future.
Well, there's some fabulous questions coming in here, and two things I just want to say. I wasn't the only person who pointed out that wonderful quote from your consultant, Stephanie, about not only making space to hear, but making space to heed community voices. That is, as Guff said, really sage advice. Yeah. So here's a question that's come in, and it really hits the nail on the head. How do you deal with loud resistance from an influential few?
I take those on a case-by-case basis. I think the first thing I'd say is we certainly had some of that, especially as we moved to unrestricted funding. A couple of members who hadn't been able to participate in our learning sessions about how hard it is for nonprofits to create a budget and how difficult it is to allocate money for this thing and have to apply to 3 different funders hoping somebody funds the pencils, for example. And, I think at the heart of it, I know that my members are here for the right reasons. They're here because they want to serve the community. So when I've had sort of those loud voices that are very influential in our organization concerned about moves that we've made, I have gotten on the phone with them or met with them one-on-one to just talk through their concerns. Because often it's not really about the change, it's about how they're afraid the changes might impact, pieces of our grant making or the level of impact that we're going to be able to share with our members. But again, just communication, allowing space to voice concerns and ask questions and doing everything in my power to bring them along. And, if nothing else, providing additional resources to read about what, folks in the field have said about unrestricted funding or similar things has been massively impactful.
And Buffy, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would echo everything Stephanie said. And I also think that, allowing space for concerns and hesitation to be brought to light, not making anyone feel badly for that, and taking a step back and not moving forward. That's one thing that I've learned through this process is to take a step back and kind of not move ahead as quickly as I personally may tend to. My work style is to do that, but it's been very valuable for me individually to have a better sense of kind of what happens at the end of the day when you do that, right? And so that was a good process. Again, I think for all of us individually who are leaders in the organization, but also for the organization overall, which is to address it, communicate, and then be able to build as best a consensus as you can to be able to move forward.
I'm reminded of the quote, I believe it was from Steve Jobs, who said that he liked to move fast and break things. And this is not a time to be following that philosophy for sure, right? Right. Another question came in about how you broach the idea of unrestricted funding, Stephanie, with your members, because it is it's such a giving up of power from the grant maker's perspective. So how did you broach that with your membership?
In many ways, it really did start with learning opportunities, bringing in experts to start talking about the concept of trust-based philanthropy. We've had panels where we've brought in funders that had already made the switch to unrestricted funding to tell us this is how we made the switch. This is what it's done. Inviting nonprofits to speak and share with us how impactful unrestricted funding has been. Really, education has been the key point of it all. And then, as I mentioned, those small group conversations with members during the strategic planning process. We had been sort of stacking the field with learning, and we knew who was really excited about the learning. But then in those small group conversations, it was the first time that we really said, hey, this is something we're most likely going to be doing. And making sure that we had sort of members on board who really believed in those types of changes, so that they could, if nothing else, stand up and say, I support this change. I think this is really important. Just knowing who is on your team, if you will, and making sure that there's a lot of members willing to reach out and have conversations.
And Buffy, what about you? How do you approach something as ingrained in most grant-making organizations that you're interested in changing?
Yeah, I again would echo what you said, Stephanie, in a lot of ways. And I think I really love what I think, Guff, you put in the chat about moving at the speed of trust, go slow to go fast. I am going to take that with me. And I think, allowing voices to be heard and allowing for, as I mentioned before, hesitation, slowing down, bringing people along, regardless what kind of change it is, regardless if you're working in a giving circle, a collective giving effort. I think that's a philosophy that I will take with me forever, right? That's a way to build consensus, have a greater impact, and again, move slow to go fast.
Yes, we're getting another comment from Gus, who says, fast alone, far together. I like that.
Absolutely.
Buffy, so I'm curious about this transition from your advisory board to getting more members engaged. What is your, what has replaced the advisory board, and has that transition, which again is seismic, engaged more members in Howard County?
Well, we haven't replaced our advisory board. That is still our leadership body. But under the advisory board's direction, we have the 4 distinct ways that we're inviting our members to give. So, as a community member, sponsoring our events as a sponsor member, as a legacy member, and that is still directed in all the ways that women have been giving for years. But it better branded, better understood, more engagement opportunity. This new one, which we have done this year for our 20th anniversary, and we're still hoping more members will join by the end of this month, is our Big Give. And for now, Susan, we will still have our advisory board that will direct kind of all of our efforts, but the women who choose to participate in the Big Give will have direct influence on where that money goes, which is different than the way we do things now.
I see.
So
Wonderful.
as that grows, we hope that will grow so that we have more of a traditional giving circle operation, as well as multiple entry points to give in ways people have been used to giving for 20 years. It's still something we're working on. And I remember talking to someone 2 years ago in Seattle about, we were just embarking on this pathway, and they're like, well, you got to get back to me. I don't know how you're going to do that. And so here we are. We will see how it rolls out, but this is our plan for the next 20 years, is to really try to bring in that traditional giving circle model.
Wow, I'm so impressed that Howard County is even saying the words 20 years from now. As always, when affiliate members hear about endowments, there are questions. So can you please talk about, and I'll just read the question directly. How have you built the endowments, and what are they used for? What is the donor attraction to that, i.e. the endowment, over grants?
That's a great question. I'll just jump in, Stephanie, and say that our founding body, the 15 women who founded the circle, were very focused on wanting to leave a legacy in our county and make sure that there was always money in perpetuity to focus on women and girls, and that it was known, that it was a known entity in the community. And so we built our endowment so that there will always be money. And I think what is enticing to donors, especially donors of a certain age, is that they can leave a legacy through the endowment. There's a number of opportunities to do that. We're even promoting women who are giving to the endowment in a variety of ways and why they want to be giving, why that's important to them versus money in, money out. But also recognizing that that kind of philosophy or giving style wasn't for everyone, and so wanted to have other opportunities to give. And what we do with the endowment is take, the 5% that you can use, and that is going toward our administrative costs.
I see. Okay. Stephanie, we're getting a little tight on time, but I'd love a quick answer from you about how you use your endowment.
Very similar to Buffy. We began with an endowment, and the original intention was to make sure that our work would continue on beyond the founder's lifetime. And we've had, obviously it's been very successful. I think I mentioned we're up to 4.8. We touched 5 million in January, but I think anybody who has an endowment has seen those numbers dip a bit. Our member dues, a portion of it has always gone towards the endowment. So just to give you that breakdown a bit, if a member pays $2,500 in dues, $1,500 goes directly into our grants, $500 to the endowment, and $500 to operations. And the purpose of the endowment really, outside of just sort of that legacy piece, is that the distributable amount that Buffy was mentioning spins off a significant portion of our operating expenses. I think next fiscal year, it's looking like our endowment will cover close to 40% of our administrative costs. Wow. And the hope there is someday it'll fully cover them so that 100% of a member's dues can go directly out the door.
Okay. We just had a quick question about what do we mean by unrestricted funding? And I apologize that none of us explained that up front in case there were people who weren't familiar with that. Unrestricted funding is funding that can be used as the recipient deems most appropriate, whereas restricted funding is typically funding of a specific program or initiative. So unrestricted funding can be used for, what was your example earlier, Stephanie?
Whatever arising needs are, staff costs, rent, utilities.
Right, exactly.
It can be used for those direct program costs too.
And restricted funds cannot be. So, well, thank you two for what an educational session this was. It's so impressive what you two have done, and you seem to make it all seem like it was just a piece of cake, when those of us who run collective giving groups know that it's not that easy. So it's been a great pleasure spending this last hour with everybody, sharing these approaches, results, and lessons as we all work to run toward and not from change. If there are further questions or you have a desire to connect with us, please note our contact information on this slide. We'll also use the We Give Summit community forum to post answers if there are questions we didn't address today. We appreciate you and wish all of you the best in your efforts to bring people together to make profound long-term differences in your communities. Enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan and Buffy and everyone. That was just incredible. And I loved how tactical and real it was. So many of our sessions have been sort of higher level, and we also need to get to the nitty gritty. So thank you all for sharing. A 2-question poll should be coming right now at you in this Zoom. It's so important for us to be able to evaluate our whole summit. So please take 10 seconds to fill that out. And then a few announcements from here, right at the top of the hour in a little over 10 minutes. We're keeping on the change wagon. Our next session is with the incomparables, Sudha Nandan-Gopal and Marcus Walton from GEO. They'll be talking about collective action is key for systems change. So definitely stick around for that next section. It's going to be wonderful. And I also wanted to give one special announcement, which is we're doing a pop-up giving circle tomorrow, Saturday. Our closer for the entire We Give Summit it couldn't be a summit around collective giving if we didn't practice what we preach and engage in a pop-up giving circle ourselves. So we really hope you'll join us for that. But we also know it's a Saturday and not everyone is able to. So I'm popping in the chat right now a link to the Grapevine page, our deep partners and friends in this work, and they'll be, you can donate on that page at any moment if you'd like, even if you aren't able to join us tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Thank you. See you soon.